If you really look at the landscape of American television news, across the latter half of the 20th century and well into the 21st, there are very few names that cast a shadow as long or as transformative as Barbara Walters.
That's absolutely right.
Her career wasn't just a long series of jobs. It was, in many ways, a revolution. We're talking about a career stretching from 1951 all the way through 2015.
6 decades. I mean, it's an incredible duration of influence, especially on how we consume news and, maybe more importantly, who we see delivering it.
It's a truly unparalleled status in broadcasting history. Barbara Jill Walters, born in 1929 and passing just recently in 2022, was a pioneer, a true pioneer.
She was so much more than a journalist or a television personality. She fundamentally reshaped what network broadcasting looked like. She really tore down these huge institutional gender barriers.
So a woman could not just sit at the anchor desk, but actually command the highest salary, the biggest interviews.
The biggest scoops, exactly.
So our focus today is to really explore the sources that chronicle this immense life. We want to get into the sheer breadth of her achievements, her milestones, of course, but also the unexpected personal history that really fueled her ambition.
And the behind-the-scenes struggles, I think those are key, the things that cemented her as a legend, because it wasn't an easy path. We want to ensure we cover the nuances, the lesser-known aspects of how she built this media empire.
When you look at her list of credits, it is just staggering. It really demonstrates her ability to pivot and to dominate basically every sphere of television. She spent 14 formative years on Today, from 62 to 76. She made history anchoring the ABC Evening News.
Even though that was a difficult period, from 76 to 78.
Right, and then she became this absolute fixture on the news magazine 2020 from 1979 all the way to 2004.
And then, even in her later career, she pivots again. She creates and co-hosts the powerhouse daytime talk show The View from 97 until her official retirement from it in 2014.
And the industry certainly recognized her contribution. She was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame pretty early on, actually, back in 1989.
And later, she was honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award from NATAS, the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, in the year 2000. Her influence just spanned generations.
So to really understand that relentless drive and the very distinctive interviewing style she became famous for, we have to start at the beginning.
We do. We have to explore the truly unstable, show business-rooted foundations of her life. That's what shaped the unflappable interviewer the world came to know.
Okay, let's unpack this. Her family background. Her mother was Dina Seletsky, and her father was Lou Walters, who was born Louis Abraham Warmwater.
Right, and that name itself immediately connects her to the history of Russian Jewish immigration to the United States.
That history is so important here.
It is. Specifically, her paternal grandfather, Abraham Isaac Warmwasser, he emigrated from Odu in Poland. He initially changed the family name to Warmwater when he moved to England, before the family eventually made their way to New York City in the early 1900s.
So it's a family history of movement, of reinvention.
Absolutely. And her father, Lou Walters, he was the core source of the family's volatility. A truly charismatic man, but financially, well, chaotic. His career was right in the heart of the high-stakes American entertainment world.
Yeah, this wasn't some stable business. This was a world defined by massive risk and sometimes massive reward.
Lou managed the Latin Quarter nightclub in Boston, which was a hugely successful venture.
But then he expanded, right?
Exactly. He opened the even more famous New York City location in 1942. And you have to understand, these weren't just quiet dinner clubs. They were major entertainment venues, drawing huge crowds and the biggest stars of the era.
He wasn't just a nightclub manager either. He was a bona fide Broadway producer.
He was responsible for some significant productions, most notably the Ziegfeld Follies of 1943. And then later in his career, he shifts his focus west to Las Vegas, serving as the entertainment director for the Tropicana Resort and Casino.
And that Vegas move included a particularly famous booking, didn't it?
It did. He imported the spectacular Parisian stage show, the Folies Bergère, directly to the resort's main showroom. I mean, in mid-century America, the Folies Bergère represented this kind of continental glamour and audacity. Lou Walters was always pushing the envelope.
Which meant his finances were always on a nice edge.
Always.
And this show business connection, while it gave Barbara a childhood surrounded by glamour, it also provided an extremely unstable background. It was defined by severe financial booms and, well, devastating busts.
She recounted that herself, didn't she? That her father had a tendency to make and then promptly lose several fortunes during her youth.
The contrast is so striking. Unlike her uncles who were in relatively predictable businesses like shoes or dresses, Lou's life as a booking agent and producer was volatile by its very nature.
And that constant sense of impending financial collapse or exhilarating success, that's the crucial psychological backdrop for Barbara's later, almost ruthless drive for professional security.
Right. And her insistence on negotiating those record-breaking contracts. It makes perfect sense.
It does. It's where the personal truly meets the professional, and it shaped her famous poise. Walters recalled being taken to nightclub rehearsals when she was just a child.
Surrounded by famous actresses and dancers who would make a huge fuss over her.
Exactly. And she said that this exposure, being around celebrities constantly from such a young age, it prevented her from ever being in awe of them later on.
It just normalized fame for her. It was a job, not some magical state of being.
That is the essential ingredient in her interviewing style. If you aren't starstruck, you can ask questions with authority, with curiosity, and without, deference.
But the price of that education was that instability. She remembered the good times, the sprawling penthouse on Central Park West, but she also vividly recalled the eventual gut-wrenching crash.
The ultimate loss was profound. Her father eventually lost the nightclubs. He lost the penthouse.
Walters recalled her father having a nervous breakdown, and when the family moved to Florida, the government stepped in.
Right. They seized all the family's remaining assets. The house, the car, even the furniture, all of it gone, due to outstanding debts from the clubs.
That experience of total loss where the rug is just repeatedly pulled out from under you, it provided such a clear motivation for her relentless pursuit of control and financial independence in her own career.
And that financial stress was layered on top of significant personal tragedy.
Yes, her older brother, Burton, he died of pneumonia when he was only 14 months old. A huge early family trauma.
And on top of that, her older sister, Jacqueline, was born with mental disabilities and required extensive care until she passed away in 1985. The combination of intense financial anxiety and deep personal loss, it formed a backdrop of real vulnerability for her youth.
And then there's this unexpected detail that just highlights how unconventional her upbringing truly was.
The connection to the underworld of the entertainment business.
Exactly. The source material notes that during a period in her childhood, while living in Miami Beach, she briefly lived under the care of the notorious mobster Bill Dwyer.
That's a remarkable detail. It paints a picture so far removed from the polished news anchor we all imagine. It just speaks volumes about the milieu of risk and power she navigated from a very young age.
So her education, naturally, was constantly disrupted by these family moves. She attended the Lawrence School in Brookline, Massachusetts, then the Ethical Culture Fieldston School in New York City, and then the Birch-Wathen School.
Constantly shifting between public and private institutions.
And she ultimately wrapped up her formal education with the Bachelor of Arts in English from Sarah Lawrence College in Yonkers, graduating in 1951. With that degree, she was ready to tackle the working world.
Which sets the stage for the next part of her career, climbing that incredibly steep ladder of broadcasting. And the second phase is just defined by these often frustrating initial steps.
She was consistently underestimated.
And she had to fight against the incredibly rigid gender norms that defined television news in the 1950s and 60s.
She started small, right out of college, working for a year at a small ad agency in New York.
But she quickly recognized that television was the future. She moved to the NBC flagship station, WNBT-TV, which is now WNBC, to focus on publicity and writing press releases. This is where she really began to understand the mechanics of the medium.
She was already showing an aptitude for producing early on, too. In 1953, she produced a short 15-minute children's program called Ask the Camera.
Which is fascinating because that program was directed by Roone Arledge.
The Roone Arledge, who would later become one of the most powerful and transformative figures in all of American broadcasting, first at ABC Sports and then ABC News.
Where Walters would eventually make her landmark move, it's an incredible connection.
She had a brief stint producing the Eloise McKellen show at WPIX, but that was canceled quickly in '54. Then she went on to be a writer on the morning show at CBS in 1955.
So she's just moving from job to job, gathering experience in writing, producing, publicity, all essential tools for her future autonomy.
After working as a publicist at Tex McCrary Inc. and as a writer for Redbook magazine, the trajectory shifted dramatically. The real breakthrough, the place where she started to build her professional identity, was joining the Today Show in 1961.
but not in the role we remember her in.
No, not at all. When she joined Today, it was strictly as a writer and researcher. Her initial on-air role was entirely confined to what the network deemed appropriate for a woman in news,
She was assigned the role known as the Today Girl.
handling lighter assignments and, yes, even the weather segments.
And this is such a crucial historical point. She was intensely aware of the limitations this role imposed. She openly referred to her predecessors in that position, people like Florence Henderson and Estelle Parsons, as tea-pourers.
Tea-pourers. That term just encapsulates the institutional sexism of the era.
It does. The woman's role was to be decorative, accessible, subservient, not journalistic. They were there for the cooking segments, the lighter interviews, the fashion reports. It implicitly confirmed that hard news was the domain of men.
And that was the gender ceiling she was absolutely determined to shatter.
The genius of Walters was that she leveraged this very limited platform to demonstrate her competence. Within a year, she insisted on moving beyond just being the Today Girl.
She became a reporter at large. She demanded the right to develop, write, and edit her own segments and interviews. She was essentially creating her own job description within that rigid hierarchy.
And the assignments she shows, they immediately showed her interest in diving deep into fascinating, complex human experiences. She did a very serious and well-received segment called A Day in the Life of a Nun.
Right, showing her commitment to spiritual and social reportage.
But at the same time, she also produced a feature on the daily life of a Playboy bunny. This ability to bridge the gap between serious news and accessible cultural commentary became her absolute trademark.
That balance between rigorous reportage and these personality-driven stories is what allowed her to connect with a mass audience. But this rise was not easy. The sources confirm she faced constant, profound struggles against the prevailing male structure of network news.
The struggle really became institutionalized when Frank McGee became the host in 1971. He was famously resistant to sharing authority, particularly with a woman who had come up through the Today Girl ranks.
And this is a critical point that you have to fully grasp. The source material notes McGee imposed a strict rule.
And an unbelievable rule.
He refused to do any joint interviews with Walters unless he was granted the right to ask the first 3 questions.
Just imagine that. Every single time she sat down with a major political figure or a celebrity, she was systematically required to wait her turn. She was institutionally mandated to be the secondary interviewer.
You have to think about how that limitation affected her preparation, her confidence. She always had to craft her approach, knowing that the essential setup and initial rapport would be handled by her male co-host. It perfectly illustrates the systemic obstacles she faced.
She had to be demonstrably superior, more prepared, more insightful than her male colleagues just to earn a fractional shared position. And that rule wasn't lifted until McGee became ill.
It wasn't until his death in 1974 that NBC finally, officially, designated her as co-host,
making her the first woman in history to hold that position on a major American network news program. Her victory was so hard-won, and it only came through an unfortunate vacancy.
We should also point out, though, that while she was climbing this ladder at Today, she was independently developing her hosting skills. Starting in '71, she hosted Not for Women Only,
which was a local NBC affiliate program that ran immediately after the Today Show.
Right, and that allowed her to build confidence in her own interviewing repertoire outside of the constraints of the main network program.
And all that groundwork paved the way for the historic and highly controversial leap she made next.
Becoming the $1 million anchor. This move didn't just redefine her life. It redefined the financial expectations for every journalist who followed her.
Indeed. The moves that absolutely dominated headlines came in 1976 when she made the switch to ABC. She signed a 5-year contract worth a massive $5 million.
And that figure, in 1976, requires some crucial context.
It does. At the time, that contract established her, without a doubt, as the highest-paid news anchor in the entire country, male or female.
To put that in perspective, the $1 million annual salary would be equivalent to somewhere in the range of $5 to $6 million today.
And that was significantly higher than many of the established, respected male anchors of the time. It was a statement that she was no longer accepting a secondary role or secondary pay.
It was a true professional and financial landmark for any woman in news. But her immediate transition to the ABC Evening News was notoriously challenging.
She became the first American female co-anchor of a network evening news program, paired with the legendary Harry Reasoner.
And the professional tension was palpable. It was widely reported in the media, often characterized as a clash of personalities, of styles. Reasoner was clearly unhappy.
The working relationship was difficult right from the start. But it's important to look at Walter's later clarification on this because it provides some necessary nuance.
She clarified that the friction wasn't necessarily a personal hatred directed solely at her.
Right. Reasoner, according to Walters, disliked having any co-anchor and was generally unhappy at ABC at that time. She suggested the friction was rooted in his overall dissatisfaction rather than a specific animus toward her.
And that perspective is really supported by their interactions after that intense period ended. Years later, in 1981, Reasoner participated in a memorable and quite cordial interview with Walters on 2020.
So the intense public perception of a bitter feud might have overshadowed a more complex, circumstantial, professional strain.
Before she fully transitioned into her long, successful role at 2020, she had already established her credentials in the highest echelons of political journalism, presidential debates.
She was chosen to moderate two key high-stakes debates. First, she moderated the third and final debate between Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford in 1976, a massive platform.
And then she moderated another significant presidential debate in 1984. Being selected for these roles, especially during her early tumultuous years at ABC, it just underscores the respect she commanded in serious political circles.
It confirms she was always taken seriously as a political journalist, despite the skepticism that surrounded her move from daytime television.
The next phase was her long, highly successful run on the news magazine 2020. In 1979, she initially joined as a correspondent, reuniting with her former Today Show host, Hugh Downs.
She became the official co-host with Downs in 1984, and she remained in that role until she officially retired as co-host in 2004. Those 2 decades were really her defining years.
And during this period at ABC News, she was involved in far more than just the news magazine. She was a key commentator on major network specials, including presidential inaugurations and, crucially, the network's intense coverage following the September 11th attacks.
She solidified her status as a serious and essential figure in crisis coverage.
And now we get to the heart of her legacy, the art of the interview itself. She became globally renowned for what was dubbed personality journalism and for securing these major scoop interviews that seemed impossible for anyone else to get.
Her style was truly distinctive. She managed to occupy 2 different journalistic lanes at the same time. She combined meticulous, detailed research, the hard news approach, with a probing, almost empathetic approach to personal vulnerability.
She allowed subjects to reveal themselves on an intimate level, often leading to profoundly emotional and revealing answers, sometimes through questions that seemed deceptively simple.
And the scope of her access was just unparalleled. Domestically, she interviewed every sitting U.S. president and every first lady, starting with Richard and Pat Nixon all the way through to Barack and Michelle Obama.
She also interviewed both Donald Trump and Joe Biden before either of them secured the presidency.
But her greatest scoops often involved these diplomatic and international breakthroughs that went beyond mere personality profiles. The clearest example is that landmark joint interview in November 1977.
With Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin.
Exactly. At the crucial moment when they were deeply involved in negotiating what would become the historic Egypt-Israel peace treaty.
Securing that joint interview wasn't just a news scoop. It was a diplomatic event in itself. It required a level of trust and access that few, if any, other American journalists possessed.
That scoop was so intensely competitive that there's a legendary anecdote involving the undisputed king of network news, Walter Cronkite. The source material notes that at the end of Cronkite's own interview with the leaders, he was heard anxiously asking his producers, "Did Barber get anything I didn't get?"
That reaction just perfectly captures the intense competition she brought to the field. She made her peers anxious about being beaten.
She was equally adept at securing interviews with authoritarian and challenging figures across the globe. Her roster included Fidel Castro, Saddam Hussein, Vladimir Putin, Bashar al-Assad, Hugo Chavez, China's Jiang Zemin.
And she successfully navigated the complex politics of getting sit-downs with figures like the UK's Margaret Thatcher and India's Indira Gandhi.
Let's delve deeper into that 1977 Fidel Castro interview. It spanned 2 days in Cuba and it offered a rare glimpse into the personality behind the dictator.
Walters described him as freewheeling, charming, and humorous during their non-interview time together.
Yet, and this is consistent with her style, she used that established rapport to ask the most penetrating, fundamental questions. She confronted him directly on the lack of basic freedoms. She said, "You allow no dissent. Your newspapers, radio, television, motion pictures are under state control."
It's the perfect example of her technique. secure access through diplomacy, then use the opportunity for piercing journalistic critique.
And Castro's reply was startlingly candid. He bypassed the usual diplomatic doublespeak. He stated honestly that a newspaper opposed to socialism would not be allowed by the party, the government, or the people, and he claimed they were very satisfied about that.
It was a moment of shocking transparency about the reality of his regime.
And Walter's conclusion on air summarized the entire ideological chasm between them with exceptional clarity. She signed off by saying, "What we disagreed on most profoundly is the meaning of freedom, and that is what truly separates us."
That sentence is why the interview endures. It cut through the policy differences to the foundational philosophical conflict.
There's also a remarkable, unexpected detail from that trip that didn't make the broadcast.
The baseball connection.
Exactly. Walters noted that she saw New York Yankees owner George Steinbrenner, pitcher Whitey Ford, and several other Yankees personnel in Cuba who were there to assist Cuban ballplayers.
It's such a strange juxtaposition. Historic diplomatic negotiations taking place alongside this quiet baseball diplomacy. It just underscores how Walters was often present when unexpected cultural and political lines were being crossed.
Moving to her interviews with cultural icons, we absolutely must address the notorious tree question she directed at Katharine Hepburn.
The one that became fodder for parody,
Yeah.
most famously by Gilda Radner.
Yes, and it's essential to restore the journalistic context of that question because it's so often lost in the caricature.
Let's unpack it. On her final 2020 episode, Walters actually showed the clip. She clarified that Hepburn had first initiated the metaphor, stating that she felt like a strong tree in her old age.
So Walter's follow-up question, what kind of a tree, was simply a natural, curiosity-driven response to Hepburn's own analogy.
And Hepburn's reply, which is also often forgotten, was typically practical and pointed. She didn't respond with poetic nonsense. She said, an oak, specifically because oaks do not get Dutch elm disease.
The context just transforms the question from an absurdity into a revealing exchange about Hepburn's grounded, practical nature.
And the fact that she even secured the interview with Hepburn was a massive coup. Hepburn famously refused most media interaction.
She initially demanded to meet Walters first. When Walters arrived, Hepburn humorously broke the ice, demanding, "You're late, have you brought me chocolates?"
And Walters, who hadn't, made sure she complied with chocolates for all subsequent meetings. It shows her commitment to building and maintaining those relationships with challenging subjects.
Shifting now to the truly sensational side of her journalism, we have to cover the Monica Lewinsky interview in 1999. This was not merely a news report, it was a cultural phenomenon.
It pulled in a staggering, record-breaking 74 million viewers. That remains the highest rating ever recorded for a news program of its type.
That viewership alone demonstrates the massive public hunger for the kind of intimate, personality-driven journalism Walters delivered. The definitive exchange of that interview came when Walters asked Lewinsky the ultimate question about the future.
What will you tell your children when you have them?
And Lewinsky's reply was so succinct and mournful. Mommy made a big mistake.
Walters then used her command of the moment to deliver her famous sign-off, turning to the camera and saying, "That is the understatement of the year."
That line became instantly iconic. It defined the public's judgment of the scandal. But, while she often captured the cultural moment perfectly, she later expressed genuine professional regret over an exchange related to her recurring special, Barbara Walters' 10 Most Fascinating People.
This touches on the ethical tensions inherent in her style. Specifically, the 2000 interview with pop star Ricky Martin. She pressed him publicly about his sexuality before he had publicly come out.
Martin later stated he felt violated by the encounter, and Walters herself acknowledged this major misstep a decade later, in 2010, expressing regret for having pushed the issue.
This incident is highly significant because it forces a discussion about the line she constantly walked. The balance between the professional need to ask a probing, relevant question and the human need to respect a subject's personal timeline and privacy.
And while she was often chasing fame and power, it's worth noting that her most inspirational interviewee, in her own estimation, was someone far removed from celebrity.
She identified Robert Smith Fadis, a deaf-blind man who dedicated his life to improving the lives of other deaf-blind individuals, as her most inspirational subject. That choice reflects a deeper journalistic commitment.
It does. And moving into the next phase, we witness Walters' transition from being solely an on-air star to becoming a powerful media entrepreneur who built her own intellectual property empire. This is the era dominated by the creation of The View.
She didn't just accept a job hosting The View. She created, produced, and co-hosted the ABC daytime talk show, which premiered in 1997.
And crucially, she was co-executive producer of Barwall Productions alongside her longtime business partner, Bill Getty. This structure gave her significant creative, strategic, and financial control.
The original concept for The View was revolutionary for daytime television. The concept was explicitly a forum for women of different generations, backgrounds, and views.
By bringing together these diverse female voices, not just to report the news, but to discuss cultural and political events from a personal perspective, Walters tapped into an enormous, underserved daytime audience.
The format was immensely successful. It garnered significant industry recognition, validating her move into production. The View won Daytime Emmy Awards for Best Talk Show in 2003.
And later, Walters shared the award for Best Talk Show Host in 2009 with her co-hosts at the time.
Her retirement from this multifaceted career wasn't a sudden exit. It was a highly complex, multi-stage, years-long farewell tour that she controlled meticulously.
Rumors first circulated in March 2013 that she would retire in May 2014, and she initially refused to confirm or deny them. She famously said she would announce her retirement on her own program, promising the paparazzi will be the last to know.
It just speaks volumes about her desire to always manage her own narrative.
She made the official announcement 6 weeks later, in May 2013, confirming her retirement from hosting and interviewing, but with a crucial stipulation. She would continue as the show's executive producer for as long as The View remained on the air.
She retained her financial and creative stake. Her official retirement as co-host of The View was a major television event on May 15, 2014.
But she, predictably, did not cease working entirely. She returned intermittently as a guest co-host in 2014 and 2015.
And she came out of retirement multiple times, specifically for high-profile exclusive interviews. For example, in June 2014, she hosted a special 2020 interview with Peter Roger, the father of the perpetrator of the Isla Vista killings.
She used her unique access and gravitas to conduct interviews that required extreme sensitivity and profile. She also continued to host her annual 10 Most Fascinating People special in both 2014 and 2015.
Her final official on-air interviews were conducted in 2015. These included a sit-down with Mary Kay Letourneau, and then later that year, 2 highly publicized interviews with then-presidential candidate Donald Trump and his wife, Melania.
Her absolute final honor interview for ABC News was with Donald Trump in December 2015, and that final interview marked the end of her visible career. Her last known public appearance was in 2016.
But there is a fascinating, poignant detail from her final years that speaks to her enduring presence within ABC.
A 2020 senior producer noted that for years after 2016, her office was meticulously kept just as it was. Daily papers were still delivered, her office extension was retained long after she'd stopped coming in.
It just symbolizes the immense respect and nearly institutional status she maintained within the organization she had spent decades transforming. Which brings us to her personal life, the complex relationships that informed her career, her legacy, and her final words.
She was married 4 times to 3 different men. Her first marriage in 1955 was to Robert Henry Katz, a business executive, but that was annulled after only 11 months.
Her second marriage was to theatrical producer Lee Goober in 1963. They divorced in 76. And it was during this marriage that they adopted their daughter, Jacqueline Dina Goober, in 1968.
Naming her after Walter's elder sister, Walters had struggled privately with 3 miscarriages before pursuing adoption.
And her third husband was Merv Adelson, the CEO of Lorimar Television. Their relationship was highly tumultuous. They married in 81, divorced in 84, only to remarry in 86, and then divorce a final time in 1992.
Beyond her marriages, she maintained a series of unexpected and highly significant relationships that are critical to understanding her connections to power. One of the most surprising was her lifelong loyalty to the notorious figure, Roy Cohn.
She dated him in college, and she maintained this devotion to him her entire life.
Her loyalty stemmed from deep, formative gratitude. She revealed in her autobiography that Cohn provided essential legal assistance to her father during that time of financial instability in Las Vegas.
Lou Walters was facing an arrest warrant for failure to appear, and Cohn used his immense influence to get the charge dismissed.
And that gratitude extended even further. Cohn also assisted her with the complex and sensitive adoption of her daughter, Jacqueline.
Her devotion was so profound that she testified as a character witness at his 1986 disbarment trial, an extraordinarily controversial move for a major network journalist.
It really illustrates the deep personal importance she placed on loyalty stemming from her family's past crises.
She was also romantically linked to other prominent figures, including future U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, whom she dated in the 1970s.
However, one relationship that created the most intense headlines when her memoir was published was the affair she had in the 1970s with Edward Brooke.
Who was then a married United States Senator from Massachusetts and a trailblazing Republican politician.
The source material notes that they ended the affair mutually to protect both of their careers from the potential scandal, which would have been devastating in that era.
And Walters noted she deeply regretted that they felt compelled to make that choice, which illustrates the profound sacrifices she made for her career stability, that thing she so desperately sought after her unstable childhood.
Despite the intense focus on her professional life, she did express a profound personal regret later on. In 2013, Walters publicly stated that she regretted not having had more children,
Suggesting that the balance she struck between career dominance and personal fulfillment always left a poignant gap.
regarding her health in her later years, she was characteristically transparent. In May 2010, she openly discussed undergoing open heart surgery to replace a faulty aortic valve.
Barbara Walters died peacefully at her home in Manhattan on December 30, 2022, at the age of 93. She had been suffering from dementia in her final years.
Her final resting place is Lakeside Memorial Park, a Jewish cemetery in Doral, Florida, where she is buried next to her sister and parents, reflecting the ultimate importance of her family origins.
And her final statement, now famously etched into her gravestone, serves as a powerful summary of her extraordinary, high-stakes life. No regrets. I had a great life.
Her professional legacy is truly transformative. Her success is directly credited with creating career opportunities for an entire generation of future female network anchors, people like Jane Pauley, Katie Couric, Diane Sawyer.
She shattered the existing executive perception that women could not handle, negotiate for, or successfully report hard news.
And she cemented her status in popular culture, perhaps most notably through Gilda Radner's enduring Baba Wawa parody on Saturday Night Live.
The impression, which gently focused on her distinctive speech and rounded R's, was a sign that she had become so famous, so influential, that she was immediately recognizable across the country.
Her life story is one of sheer perseverance against formidable institutional and gender barriers, fueled by a chaotic yet ultimately formative childhood. She spent her career seeking the control and security that her youth lacked.
If we look back at her entire career, especially her technique of demanding radical transparency from her subjects, there is a final thought for you to consider about her own public persona.
Right. Walters specialized in probing the infinite vulnerabilities of the world's most powerful people, often securing highly emotional revelations.
Yet she meticulously and rigorously managed her own narrative. She only revealed the key, potentially career-risking personal details, like the extent of her loyalty to Roy Cohn or the affair with Senator Brooke decades later, through her memoir.
She waited until the political risk to her career was negligible.
So the question then becomes, what is the fundamental contrast between the intense, probing intimacy she demanded from her subjects and the rigorously controlled, carefully timed nature of her own public self-disclosure?
It speaks to the ultimate complexity of the woman who didn't just report the news, but define the very nature of modern television journalism.
Thanks for listening.